Hey there everybody, what's happening? Cinema Recap here, and today we're going to talk about Tomorrowland. Spoilers ahead. So we start with Frank, filling us in on the darkness of our future. Apparently it's scary and unpredictable. But his camera holder, young Casey, keeps interrupting him to ask about the future of his childhood. She pushes and pushes and begrudgingly admits that she's right. Flashback to 1964. Frank is just a little kid, showing up on his own to Tomorrowland at Disney World to enter their technology competition with a jetpack that he made himself. Now the staff there is a little blown away by this precocious boy genius. Of course, he's distracted by a pretty girl, Athena, who's around his own age and thinks his invention is phenomenal. And it is. Mostly. It takes off, but he's never able to get it to really fly. Mostly just get some long, slow-motion crash landings. So when Nix, the competition coordinator and Athena's father, pushes him for how it's useful to mankind, the best answer that Frank has is that it's fun. Creation inspires people. So on the basis of that answer, and as well as the fact that it really doesn't work, Nix refuses him entry to the competition. Well, Frank's not giving up that easily. He's already had to push past his own father's ruthlessly practical objections to get here. He's not going to let some stuffy administrator stop him either. Athena seems to be on his side as well. Well, she sneaks away from her father's view and gives him some cryptic offer of assistance, sneaking into his hand a mysterious pin. He puts the badge on and hops onto It's a Small World, moving through the ride in a lazy boat by himself. Now his pin is a little more than just decorative. A laser scanner picks it up, and his boat gets rerouted through some very fancy mechanical-looking tunnels. Frank's still excited, but it's not a hard shift to get terrified. Especially once he's put into some kind of subway car that seems to move through time and or space at the speed of light. Well, he makes it in one piece and the door opens. And what he's seeing is incredible. It definitely looks like the future. Everything's wide and surrounded by clouds high up in the sky. He looks up and sees something that looks like a small spacecraft moving in the distance, carrying Athena and Nix. He's trying to get to them, but some scary looking robot arms show up and knock him off the edge of the platform. Well, he falls down below, but he's not hurt, and he still has his jetpack in hand. He meets an even bigger robot down there, one with big glowing eyes, and it fixes the minor damage that his jetpack had gotten en route. Now the robots may be friendly, but the guards certainly aren't, and they give chase, but Frank makes the bold move and jumps off that platform, starting to fall to what appears to be the ground, several thousand feet below him. Well, he's on his own. Before we go on, like the video, smash the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to get that full day of good luck. But at the last minute, he manages to snatch his falling jetpack out of the air and get on it, catching himself a few feet off the concrete, and then jetting off into the sky. Apparently, the jetpack does work in Tomorrowland, and Tomorrowland seems very cool. Everything's all shiny and futuristic with tall arching buildings and robot-powered everything. He even finds Nix, who seems to have decided to ignore him, and Athena, who takes his hand and agrees to show him the city. Cut back to Frank speaking to the audience and still getting interrupted by Casey to let her tell the story her own way, and now we're getting a glimpse into Casey's life. She started as a little girl obsessed with the stars, but grew into a capricious teenager who rides a motorcycle and uses drones to break into NASA's very, very guarded demolition compound. Well, she's pretty good, and she manages to get in, stealing a mysterious something, and then get out. Back at home, she sneaks back in and gets caught by her little brother. They talk for a bit, and we find out that Casey's been making a habit of these mysterious midnight excursions. So the next day, we see that Casey's definitely a bit of a genius, at least in electronics and robotics, able to solve problems for her engineer father. Well, he's on the cusp of losing his job as soon as NASA takes down the platform that he doesn't know she's been breaking into every night. And now it's crystal clear what her mission is. He's resigned to his fate, but she's much more optimistic. Schools know better. Every teacher is teaching something morose. No hope, no optimism, just the endless slog through the problems of the world. Casey is eternally solutions-oriented, but the teachers aren't able to get on board with her approach. Now after school, she gets picked up by the cops for some minor vandalism over at NASA. They turn her back out pretty quickly, and when her confiscated possessions are returned to her, Frank's pin is mixed in with them. Well, she's never seen it before.
That's not mine.
What's not yours?
But the second she touches it, the world around her disappears, and she finds herself in Tomorrowland. Well, she's shocked, but intrigued, and there's not enough time to really explore. Her dad picks her up from jail, understandably furious. She tries to tell him about the pin, but nothing happens when he touches it, so how's he supposed to believe anything? And once she's safely home, it's time to explore Tomorrowland for real. Well, it's not easy because it seems like the way she moves around in this new world also is moving her body in the old world, making her crash into doorways and fall down stairs. But she keeps going, and there's a lot to see. Hover rails, people on jetpacks, three-dimensional maps, pools of water that float in midair. No one seems to be able to see her, so she can roam and explore to her heart's content. She even sees kids her own age who seem to be planning for a space flight. And just as she's getting into it though, the pin gives her a warning. It looks like she's only got 2 minutes of battery left. And she's trying to get on that ship with them, but the battery cuts out and she's standing waist deep in a lagoon near her house, back in the real world. Her brother Nate is always ready to help. They get on the computer and track down the origin of the badge, as well as some store in the middle of nowhere, Texas that's looking to buy one. Nate agrees to cover her with her dad so she can take off and get a long bus ride across the country. Meanwhile, Athena shows up at Casey's house looking for her. Nate figures out that she's from the future pretty quickly, and she's still the exact same age as when we met her back in '64. He tells her where Casey went and that she's looking for another pin, and Athena's whole face lights up. She's ready to go. Now down in Texas, Casey finally makes it to the shop. The eclectic owners know exactly what that pin is, and they fill Casey in on some of the details. They explain to her that the pins are only linked to Tomorrowland, which is a magical place where people use their science and technology to pursue peace and progress. She's asking more questions, but they shut them down and start asking her some questions instead. Well, Casey gets freaked out and tries to leave, but they quickly pull out some futuristic laser guns and threaten to shoot her unless she tells them where the girl is who gave her the pin. And Casey still doesn't know how she ended up with that pin, but it's safe to say that these guys are talking about Athena. So she's backed into a corner and things are looking pretty bad. But then Athena herself shows up for the rescue. The owners of the store are taken out, and even turn out to be robots. Athena destroys them and drags Casey out of the store right before the robots self-destruct and take the whole place down with them. Now Athena won't tell Casey how she knows her name, but they jump into a car and Athena starts driving them to safety, introducing herself. That is until her speech starts to glitch and a hole in her neck shows us and Casey that this Athena is a robot as well.
So sorry about that. Here.
Casey crashes the car and books it as fast as she can, totally overwhelmed. Athena goes to follow but is taken out by a truck driving by. Well, she only takes a minute to pop back up, all in confusion, as Casey steals the truck and gets away. Athena manages to catch up to her again, and won't take no for an answer when it comes to getting Casey to listen to the truth. She alludes to the people of Tomorrowland having made something terrible that ruined the land and urges Casey to trust her. Well, Casey's nothing if not adventurous, so she goes along with the whole situation. And this whole situation has a strong Terminator for Kids vibe. Some robots disguised as Secret Service are even following them, picking up their trail back at the destroyed store. We take a brief pause for Casey to leave her father a message, telling him that she had Nate lie about where she was, but she can't tell him the truth. And she swears that she'll be home soon and in one piece. A little more time on the road strengthens the burgeoning friendship between Athena and Casey, as well as giving the audience some dribs and drabs of exposition to fill us in on Athena's project to finally recruit the right person to help her rescue Tomorrowland. She even tells Casey where they're going. Straight to Frank. Casey passes out in the passenger seat, but when she wakes up, she's alone at the end of Frank's driveway. And by this point, she's getting used to all of this. So she just dusts herself off and heads up to the house. And she makes it past a guard dog that she discovers is just an illusion. And finally gets to the man himself. He's surely not welcoming to strangers. She demands to be taken to Tomorrowland, but he's not that enthusiastic. He tells her that what she saw wasn't really Tomorrowland. It was a commercial advertising it that never got released. He says that she's been duped by Athena and everything's a scam, throwing her pin back at her and slamming the front door. Well, Casey's determined to wait that out all night if she has to, and takes a seat on his doorstep. Now Casey and Frank engage in a battle of wits that ends in Casey sneaking into the house and her and Frank fighting in front of a giant bank of monitors that's his living room. And right in the middle of it is a clock counting down to something. She asks if he's the one that built the wrong thing that destroyed Tomorrowland. But there's no time to get to the bottom of anything because the Secret Service robots are there. And they want to take Frank into custody for harboring a fugitive, as well as apprehend the fugitive herself. So the pair fight the automatons through Frank's booby-trapped house, eventually escaping on a giant rocket that swoops him out and crash lands into a lake. Where, of course, Athena is waiting to meet him.
Hello, Frank.
Still wet and grumpy, all three of them climb back into the truck and ride on in silence. So Frank and Athena bicker off and on about how she initially recruited him. And they're only interrupted when Casey goes through Frank's stuff and almost sets off a very small, very powerful bomb that he's carrying. Just in case. Frank is still insisting that Athena's a scam artist, but he reluctantly agrees to help them get back to Tomorrowland. So he takes him to his super special top secret transport pod, hidden inside a storage unit, and they prepare to start their journey. Well, they make it there, but the journey seems to take a lot out of Casey, who gets all disoriented and has to chug 2 bottles of Coke to get herself together. First stop, Paris. They land on top of the Eiffel Tower, which was apparently built to contain a secret hidden spaceship that can take them all the way to Tomorrowland. But they have to escape the human security, as well as the robot Secret Service that's still hot on their trail. They make it though, and the takeoff is glorious. It's a bumpy ride, but they still make it. Finally, they're in Tomorrowland, but it's nothing like what Casey expected. The skeleton of the world she saw is still there, but it looks like all the life is gone. Frank warns him about the people still here, that they'll probably try to kill him immediately, and it'll only take a few more seconds for Nix to show up. We learn that Frank was exiled a long time ago, and Athena was never Nix's daughter, she was his employee. One who he threatened to disassemble when he suspended her recruitment project. Frank explains to Nix that he genuinely believes that Casey can fix the world. And Casey looks like she just wants to pass out for a bit. They go with Nix anyway and do a little exploration of what remains of Tomorrowland. Finally, we get to see what it was that Frank had invented. It's a tachyon machine, something that can look at a place or a person and predict the time and cause of their downfall with absolute accuracy. It can see the future. That's what had happened to Tomorrowland. His machine had predicted the world's collapse, and it had been correct. They also show Casey the future of her own world, fated to end as well in only 58 days. Casey is absolutely not impressed. Her worldview, all her relentless optimism, it's been shook. Well, now she's miserable, and Frank gets to prepare to be deported from Tomorrowland for the second time in his life. But Casey figures out the problem. The tachyon machine and the dish that feeds it. Well, they're doing more than everyone had thought. They're actually transmitting those disastrous futures into everyone's minds. They're creating their own self-fulfilling prophecies, empowering them with the fear of the victims. They accuse Nix, and finally, he confesses. His original plan had been to show everyone the truth of the future, beamed directly into their minds, to galvanize them into action, but it never worked. He said that everyone just threw themselves into the concept and repackaged it as fiction, obsessing over their terrible future and resigning themselves to it, instead of taking action. So Nix believes it's the fault of humanity. He thinks they prefer a future that's fated to end in destruction because it takes the onus of doing anything off of each individual. Well, you know what? He's making a lot more sense than most villains do when they monologue, to be honest. Well, Frank and Casey aren't going to lie down and take this. They fight the guards and Nix, determined to fix the future. The final battle, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. It's a close run, but they still have Frank's bomb. They try to use it to destroy the tachyon machine, but it accidentally gets thrown through a portal to some deserted island back on Earth. Nix tries to shoot at Frank in retribution, but Athena saves him, getting injured in the process. She starts to shut down with no time for repairs. Frank goes up to her, and at least they have enough time to reconcile their differences and forgive each other. And Athena confesses that she wasn't supposed to, but back in the day, she somehow fell in love with him. And in the name of that love, she chooses to use her own self-destruct sequence to destroy the machine. It's her last gift to Frank. Well, she manages that, and that machine collapses and falls on Nix, who's crushed to death by that very machine he used to destroy his world. Now cut back to the present day, where it all began. Frank and Casey are telling their story to the camera, but this time we can see that they're still in Tomorrowland. They've been recruiting other dreamers, thinkers, and optimists, and are working as a team to rebuild Tomorrowland the way it was always meant to be. Thanks for hanging out till the end. This was our recap of Tomorrowland, released back in 2015, produced by Walt Disney Pictures, and starring George Clooney, Britt Robertson, and Hugh Laurie. If you enjoyed the video and feel the channel, go ahead and hit a like and subscribe for more cinema recaps.